Hey everyone, and welcome to our lecture on getting to know the command line. In this lecture, we're going to talk about starting up the command line, how we can run programs, both GUI and text mode programs, using some shell features, and then we'll take a look at how we can get some help with some of the command line stuff, such as man pages, info pages, and additional resources out there for documentation. So, getting started, we can look at how we can actually start the command line. How do we get into there? Well, there's really depends on our desktop environment, but most of them are relatively the same in that we're going to hit some sort of a start type button to get a menu. So this is KDE. It looks a lot like Windows in my opinion. You hit the start button down here and you can search up top for terminal or browse through your applications. We can see they went from all applications system to terminal. And then you just click on this little terminal icon. So in Ubuntu, it's relatively the same. I'm going to switch over here and we'll just do a live demo of it. Okay, so you click this button up here, the Ubuntu button, and you can search for the terminal. So once you find that, you can click on it. And what I usually like to do is just go ahead and, well, I have it locked now, lock it to the launcher. That way it's always over here. We're going to spend a lot of time in the terminal this semester, so I highly recommend that you do the same thing. And while I'm in here, I'm just going to go in and change some of the preferences. I like to make the font size a little bit bigger here. So let's see, custom font. Let's move this up to about 16. Alright, it makes it a little bit easier to read. So now we got the terminal open. The process pretty much the same on GNOME 3. We click on activities up here at the top, type in term or terminal. It should bring up everything that matches that, and then you can just click on the terminal itself. Okay, so this is the typical GUI terminal. You'll see that colors change. You can change colors too, like I just did by going to Edit and Profile Preferences. You'll mainly see them with white background with black text, or inverted colors such as black background with white text, or Ubuntu kind of themes out there as their own to match this purple Ubuntu theme that they like to use with their distributions. Okay, so there is another way that we can launch a terminal, specifically known as a text mode console. These are virtual terminals, or VTs, and we can get to those by pretty much just being in the Linux machine and pressing Control Alt and then one of these F keys. So F2 through 6 typically corresponds to text mode terminals, and 1, 7, and 8 are typically for GUI terminals. It's not always like that, but that is a general convention. And when you're not sure, I just start cycling through them. I'll start at 1 and just move up to 8 to find the right VT to be on. So let me show you what I mean by this. We're actually running in a VT right now. It's just running in GUI mode too. So I'm going to press Control Alt and F1, and that brings me to this little black console logon screen. Now, sometimes, depending on your laptop, you have what's called FN keys. So basically, the F keys double function as something else, maybe as volume up, volume down, something like that. So you may need to press Control Alt FN and then 1, 2, or 3, and so on. Okay. So just realize that may be the case. We can see here on VT1, I'm on TTY1 and I can log in. So this is just a text mode login. So I can use the account that I created. And now I'm logged in to the machine here just in console mode. Console mode is not nearly as flexible as that window that we had, because we are dealing with the font that we can change, but we don't have as much flexibility with. We can't really mess with the colors in here and stuff like that. But it is the exact same command line prompt that we get when we're in the GUI. So let me switch back. Let's go Control Alt F2. Let's see. It must be on F7. All right. So the way I got back there was just Control Alt and F7 in Ubuntu. Okay. And like I said, this is the exact same command line that we get when we're in the console mode. One good use case for the virtual terminals is if we're doing something in the GUI and the GUI freezes, maybe one of the applications causes the desktop environment to lock up, then we can usually still do a Control Alt F1, log in, and we can take a look at the running processes and just kill off whatever it is or restart whatever it is that is hung. And then we can switch back and usually continue using our GUI again. Okay, so we just went through that. So for text mode programs, we just type the name of the program in the command prompt. And what it's going to do is it's going to look in a particular environment variable to figure out where that program is located. So there's this special variable called path, and all environment variables are preceded by this $sign. So that the $sign just indicates that this is a variable. So we can come over here and let's echo path, and what echo does is it just repeats whatever, well, it repeats whatever you type in. So it echoes that back out. But if we pass it an environment variable, just like printing out a variable in Python or in Java, it's going to show us the contents of it. So we can see that if I type in something like free, which shows me free memory, how much memory is available, memory is in RAM, it's going to look in all of these different file paths. It's going to look in home student bin, it's going to look in home student.local/bin, user local sbin, user local bin, and so on. So all of these paths that are separated by colons, it's going to look in them to try to find a program named free. And we can actually figure out which one it's finding by using the which command. So which takes one argument, and command line arguments you just specify after the program name. So which free is going to tell me where this particular program is located, where it's finding it in the path here. So which free, we can see that's in user bin. So user bin, we should be able to find that in the path up here. Let's go and take a look. I actually see it right here. So that's in one of the directories that it would search when we type in a command and we don't tell it where it's located. The other way to run commands is we have to specify the full path to the executable or the binary. So in this particular instance, if we're going to try to run free, and if it's not located in the path, we'd have to give it the full path or the absolute path to get to free. Okay, so we can run commands that way as well. All right, and that's what they're talking about down here, where if we want to run something that, this is probably a better example, we have a program in our home directory that would not be in our path usually unless we place it there. If we want to run that, we just give it the full path to the program so it can find it as well. Okay, running GUI programs, very simple. So this is basically how GUI programs run anyways, is we just type in the executable name. I happen to know that Firefox's name is Firefox. If I wanted to, I could first try to determine where that's which Firefox. We can see that that's in user bin as well. So if I just type in Firefox, it's going to open up the browser, and then I can start using it to browse around. And you'll notice over here in the command prompt or the terminal, I haven't gotten back to a new prompt. It's like this program is running, and that's actually exactly what's happened. It's running right now, and when that program exits, we'll get our prompt back. So we come back over here and exit the program. Now we get our prompt back, and we can type in another program. So that can be kind of annoying because we're used to multitasking nowadays. So there's a few ways that we could throw Firefox in the background if we wanted to. So one way is when we run the program, we can put an ampersand behind it. Okay, so just like before, I'm running Firefox. This time I'm putting an ampersand behind it, and that ampersand says throw it in the background so that I can continue running commands. So we'll type that. You'll see here that we have one job created, and this should be the PID for the job or the process ID. And now I can go on and type in other commands like free, but at the same time, I can be over here browsing in the browser. All right, so that's one way. Let's get rid of this. Oh my goodness, we got all sorts of debug output there. So let's clear that. Another thing that we could do instead, let's say we start running Firefox, and we can use it to browse, and then over here we say, you know what, I want to run another command, maybe I want to run free. So one thing we could do is we could press Control Z, and that stops the program. Okay, so it gives me a chance to run free, but I can't do anything over here. You'll see it's grayed out. The program's actually suspended, and there's nothing that we can do with it. We can move the window, that's about it. But if I want to maybe move it to the background, I can type in BG, and that will background that process. So we can see as soon as I typed in BG, I got this 1 plus, so we added a new job, first job here, Firefox, and it threw the ampersand on the end. So now it's running in the background. I've got the command prompt where I could run commands, and I can also still use the browser. Later on, if you want to move it to the foreground, we can type in FG, sort of the inverse there of BG or background. So let's see that. If I move that to the foreground, then what's happening now is I can't type in any other commands. It shows me that it's running Firefox, but I really can't do anything like run commands. And as soon as I exit this, it'll probably try to run those guys. Yep. So it just kind of stored up that what I was typing in so that it could run it as soon as Firefox ended. Okay, so some good shell features. There is the tab key. The tab key is your best friend when you're working in the shell. So it does something called command completion. So as you're typing a command, you can press tab and it'll try to match up what it can as best as possible. So let's look at this history command real quick. What history does is it gives us all of the commands that we've typed in. So you can see, just looking back, we did echo high and echo path earlier. That's stored in our history. And if we wanted to, we could look backwards and figure out what some of these commands that we ran previously were. That can be useful in certain situations. Now, the tab completion, let's say we type in HI and just press tab twice. We'll see all of the commands that can be found in that path variable that start with HI. Okay, so as soon as I type in an S, the only one that's going to match that is history. So if I want to run the history command, I may just type that much and then press tab so that I don't have to type the rest. All right, and it also completes file paths and different arguments for certain commands as well. So that's a really nifty feature. I'd highly recommend you use that one. In addition to just running history and viewing it, we can also press the up arrow key. So the up arrow will move backwards through that history, and we should be able to get back to that echo path if we wanted to. Yep. And there's also Control R. We'll do a reverse search. So let's do a reverse search for path. And it'll find the last command that we typed in that has this string in it. So echo path was it. I can press enter and it runs that command again for me. So there's multiple ways that we can look back at the history of some of the commands that we've been running. Okay, so look through this chart and play around with some of these. Control A is a really good keyboard shortcut to remember because it'll move the cursor to the start of the line, especially when you're typing really long command lines with lots of different arguments to it. You may get to the end of it and realize that you want to get back to the beginning, and you don't want to hold down this key to get all the way back, especially if it's wrapped around and it's multiple lines. Just press Control A and it'll move you back to the front. And conversely, we can press Control E and we get back to the end. Okay, so just little shortcuts that we can use. We talked about Control R, and there's a few other ones in here. So just study that chart, play around with those. Next, let's talk about man pages. So man pages are used as a quick reference. Not really so much a tutorial. We need to sort of be familiar with the command first. Let's just, I guess, jump into a man page real quick. So man is short for manual. So we're looking at manual pages. And a lot of programs that we install come with man pages. They're help pages that basically have documentation on the program that we're going to be running. So we just looked at the history program. Let's look at the man page for it. So man history, so man followed by the command that we're interested in, will bring up the man page if one exists. And you'll see that man pages are broken down into several different sections. Not all of them are required, but you'll notice sort of a theme throughout most of them. We got the name up top, and it's letting us know that this is the GNU History Library, so this is obviously a GNU program. It's got a description, so many programs read input from the user at a command line. The GNU History Library is able to keep track of those lines, associate arbitrary data with each line, and utilize information from previous lines in composing new ones. And if we scroll down through here, so you can just press enter or use the down key, we can see some command line arguments that we can try. Should be able to. So some of these modifiers, we can specify these modifiers and have them do whatever it is that they describe themselves as. So like lowercase e will remove all but the trailing suffix, p will print the new command but not execute it, and so on. So there's basically each command has a lot more things that it can do, and to read up and find out about those, we can use the man pages. When you're ready to get out of the man page, down at the bottom, it sort of reminds us how we can do that. It's just Q to quit. So Q will get us out and back to the command line. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a program that we look up the man page for. So it could be a command like what we just did. It could be a configuration file. So as we install programs, they install configuration files, and we need to know how to edit those. What can we put in them? So one thing we can do is we can come back in here and we can look at the configuration file with the man page, and it'll maybe give us a deeper explanation than the file itself does. System calls, so as a programmer we're making system calls. This is mainly for if you're writing software, so it doesn't really apply to us here in this class, but something like a printf, we could do man printf and find out about that. So man printf, you can see that this is actually a command here, so a user command. There's different pages in the man page. So this is from page 1. I think there's like a page 5. So let's see. No. Let's try page 3. Okay. So page 3, or section 3 of the man pages, has the programmer's manual. And we can see that printf comes from stdio.h. So this is all C related programming stuff in here. But if we needed to, we could look up the APIs based on that and see, It talks about the format specifiers and things of that nature dealing with the printf. Okay, so like I was just mentioning there with the sections, we can specify man, the section number, and then what we're looking for. And password is another good example. Password is a command. Password is also a configuration file. So man passwd allows us to change a user's password. We can see that that comes from section 1 right up here, indicated with that 1. But we may also be interested in what comes out of section 5, and this talks about the password file, which is what contains all of our user accounts, sometimes an encrypted password, but not usually anymore. We'll talk more about the password file um, and its partner, the shadow file, here in this course, but it also has like the group ID and user ID, some comments, where the home directory is, and so on. So if we're going to be like trying to mess with this file or decipher it, we may want to come and read the man page from this section. All right, so each of the section numbers, they obviously have a meaning. So section 1, what we've been using the most and probably will use the most, are for executable programs and shell commands. 2 is for system calls provided by the kernel. 3, we saw 3 a minute ago with printf, those are for library calls provided by program libraries like stdio.h. 4 is for device files, so these are usually stored in /dev. That would be like our hard drive, so like /dev, SDA, SDB, and so on. Man5 is for file formats, so we saw that one with the passwd file. 6 is for games, 7 is for miscellaneous like macro packages, conventions, and so on. 8 is for sysadmin commands, so programs mostly run or exclusively ran by root, and then 9 is for kernel routines. I spend most of my time looking at ones in section 1, maybe 2, 3, and 5 for the most part. All right, there's ways that we can search through or search for a man page. So we could do a summary search using the what is command. So let's see, let's try what is password. Okay, nothing appropriate. Let's try what is passwd, and we can see that there are a few man pages here. There's passwd in section 1 that changes the user password, and there's passwd in section 5 that shows us the password file. And then there's this other one, it looks like it's in section 1 SSL. I'm not really familiar with that, but it is to compute password hashes. All right, another way, possibly a more thorough search, is this apropos, which is the same thing as man-k. Okay, and it's just a more thorough search. As a matter of fact, let's go read up about that just a little bit. Let's do a man apropos. And we see that this searches the manual page names and descriptions. Okay, so the last one, the what is, only search the summary. This one's going to search this description, which is usually a pretty large section, as well as the name section. Let's see if we get anything different here if we do an apropos password. You'll see that we get a lot more results. So that's one reason why this is a little bit more thorough. It may be giving us more than we want, but we can see that it talks about like PAM, the authentication modules that can be used in Linux. What else in here? Get shadow password file entry, put spent. Looks like that's a library function because it comes out of section 3. But as you can hopefully see, there's another way that we can search through the man page and sort of extract useful information, so that maybe Seahorse, right? Seahorse keeps passwords and keys. Maybe that's something I'm interested in, and I could go and run the man page for that and read up about it at that point. Let's also look at it. It mentioned man-k, so that is an argument or an option that we can supply to the man program. So let's look at the man page for man. And we can do a search. So we can search through this by doing a slash dash k. Alright, so it found 2 up here. And whenever you're doing a search, it's going to highlight what it finds. And we can just press N to move forward, basically to the next match. So if we keep moving forward, so it looks like we have an example here. But right here is where it actually talks about dash K and what that means. And it's the same thing as using dash dash apropos, which is equivalent to the apropos command. So this searches the short manual page descriptions for keywords and displays any matches. We could also see the apropos section 1 from the man page for more details. Alright, so those guys are essentially the same thing. What is, if you don't get any results with what is, sometimes you need to create the man database or update it. I haven't run into a situation where I have to do this. I think most of the time package managers kick this off for us, but if that's not the case, just run these 2 commands, make what is and man db, and that'll update the man database and the what is database with the latest, I guess, man pages. So we saw as we read through a man page that there's all these different sections. These sections are optional, so they don't all have to be there. But these are the ones that we'll typically see. And that's just an example of a man page. So I guess important to note here is that man takes use of a program called a pager. And the one that it uses is called less. So let's take a look at that. Alright, so let's take a look at the man page for Firefox. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump all of that into a text file so I can sort of illustrate this concept of less. So man Firefox, and this thing's known as a redirection operator. Instead of showing the stuff to us on the screen, it's going to redirect it to a file. I'm going to call that file Firefox man page. And we'll get into redirection operators later on. I just wanted to explain what that was and why you were seeing it. So if we're going to look at a text file, which is basically what a man page is, right? It's just text on the screen. Usually we'll just cat it out. And if we cat it out, cat short for concatenation, similar to programming. So it's going to dump the contents of that file to the screen. Now if I cat that out, first off, I'm at the bottom here. Thankfully, I have a terminal that allows me to scroll back. That's not always the case. In fact, if I were to switch over to one of these VTs, log in here, okay, in the same folder, if I cat out Firefox man page, I have no way to go backwards here. And that can be a problem, right? So we need some way to turn this into pages. Pages would be what's displayed on the screen. And one way to do that is to use a pager program like less. So less is a program that will take a file, such as this Firefox man page, and it allows us to view the contents of the file in what's known as pages. So I can scroll up, I can scroll down, I can search through here for using that slash like we did before to find all of the instances of Firefox, and use N to get through it. It's really weird that the text color just changed, but okay. So here we are, we're in the man page, and when we're ready to get out, we can press Q. But really I was just looking at a file there, and what I wanted to point out was we used less to do it, but when we normally just run man Firefox, it uses less as well, and that's how it's showing us all of this. Okay, so it's actually leveraging that less program to show us everything in pages. So we'll move back over to the GUI now. Right, So less has a ton of different keyboard commands. The one I use the most is the slash to search for a pattern. It only searches from the current location down. So if you need to go backwards, there is a backwards search that starts with a question mark. It's the same format, just question mark and what you're searching for. There's that N that repeats the previous search, and a couple other ones like Q that'll quit out, and H for help if you need to get some help on something. So as an alternative to man pages, there's these things known as info pages. And info pages are a lot more analogous to an HTML page than man pages are. They're not just flat documents of text. They have this notion of links, and each page is known as a node, and each node is organized into levels. And it's something that I guess the Free Software Foundation came up with, and it was supposed to take over man pages and become the new de facto man page. It just hasn't really happened. People have been slow to adopt it, or really reluctant to adopt it, and I don't find myself using info pages that much at all. I typically go to the man page if I'm roughly familiar with a command. If I'm not, or if I don't find what I'm looking for, I'll usually go straight to the internet and try to find documentation then. But I do want to mention info pages. I want for you to know that they're available. Open one up and play with it. So info pages, we have different keystrokes obviously that are relevant to that as well, so we can display help. It's always useful to figure out the help command so we can find other commands. We can move forward and backwards in a series of nodes with N and P. We can move up a level in the node hierarchy with U. And then you see down here there's a Q that exits us out of the info page system. So let's just take a quick look at an info page and then we'll move on. So let's take a quick look at the info page for the info command. So we can type clear to get rid of the stuff on the screen, and then info. So this is going to run the info command looking for information about info. Same way we ran the man command, just man followed by the program name. So that takes over the screen just like the man pages does, but what you'll notice is there's like hyperlinks in here. That's what these underlined things are, and we can follow those by pressing the enter key. So now we're at common options. Next is the output of entire files. Previous is the introduction. So I can use N and P to move around that. So N, P to go backwards. And you can kind of browse it like I guess a text-based interactive web page. Would probably be the best way to describe that. All right, and then when you're done, you just press Q to get out. All right, so additional documentation. There are other documentation directories. So user doc is one place that you may find some documentation. User share doc as well. User share doc packages. It really just depends on the package. It depends on the distribution, on where it places different documentation on the system. So we could browse and look at those. Matter of fact, let's go back over here, and the way that we move around the file system is with the cd command. So cd stands for change directory. Let's change directory to user usr/doc, and we see that doesn't actually exist in Ubuntu. So alright, let's try user share doc. That does exist, and the ls command allows us to list out the contents of that directory. Let's see if there's a familiar application in here at all. Oh goodness, there's a lot in here. Let's see if we can ls all the things that start with fire. And I see Firefox is there, so let's change directory into the Firefox directory. And what we have is a changelog for Debian, MPL, a copyright, and a README. And let's use the less program to look at that README. And it's just a little bit more documentation about the program. This one looks like it's talking about app armor here. Okay, so that's another way that we could find some useful information about some of the programs that we run. Uh, if you can't find something, like you're not sure what directory it goes in, you can use some of these commands like find, locate, and where is. I'll do a quick demo of those. So the find command, let's go back to our home directory. The find command takes a path to start searching in. So maybe we just want to start at the root, the very beginning of the file system. And then it uses a slash or a dash name to specify what it is that it's looking for. So let's say we're looking for Firefox. I'm going to get a bunch of permission denieds because I'm not running as root, so I can't go into all of these different directories and look in them. But we can see it is returning a lot of different file paths that contain the word Firefox. So there's this Etsy, Apport, Native Origins, Firefox. There's, oh Lord, lots of permission denied. Might should have ran that as root. Somewhere in here is the executable for Firefox, the actual program that we run. It should be in, where did we find that earlier? User bin. So right here, user bin Firefox. So that's one way that we could find something. Locate is another command that we could use. So locate Firefox. This one actually returned a little bit more useful information. We don't get all of those errors. So locate's actually quicker than find because locate has a database built of all of these file paths and it's very easy to search, whereas find exhaustively goes into all of these directories looking for something. So we can see down here there's some, this is part of the info pages, /info, and some other different file paths that have Firefox in it. And where is another command, so let's see, where is Firefox? That shows me where it's located. And a few other file paths that have it, the Etsy directory, that's where configurations are normally stored. We'll talk about that more when we talk about the file system. We can see where the man page is for Firefox is stored in this particular gzip file, and where some libraries are for Firefox as well. So some common documentation file formats that you'll find on the system are the man page ones. So those usually end in .1 through .9 depending on what section in the man page they fall in. There will also be compressed files, so they may be compressed with bzip or gzip. Okay, so we'll have to use a particular program to uncompress those. Similar to a zip file, we can unzip something and then view the actual file. There's just plain text files, not going to have any special markup in them. There's text, HTML, so similar to web, well, they are web pages. ODT is an open document text file, so OpenOffice is its native format, and there's PDFs and TIFFs and PNGs and JPEGs, different graphics, and PDF files, kind of a standard document format. So other places, like I mentioned earlier, I like to go from the man page straight to the internet rather than searching around for more documentation on the computer. Just because it's usually easier to find something on the internet. Even if you got to go to uh, the provider's page, whoever wrote that program, and look at the documentation on there, sometimes that's a lot easier. So, a few really good links that I'd recommend. Number one, TLDP, the Linux documentation project, really good about learning about just how Linux works in a generic kind of way. It doesn't seem to be written for any particular distribution. And then we get sort of into the distribution type help. So if we're running Ubuntu and we're having a problem, I'd probably go to help.ubuntu.com and search around in there or look on their forums. Same thing with Fedora. They have a guides page, docs.fedoraproject.org. And then, of course, Red Hat has one, OpenSUSE has one. All the different distributions have their own documentation pages. Aside from that, you may want to move on to maybe consulting some experts, like some local experts, paid consultants, the program author. Uh, here at school, visit some of the professors and ask them about it. Web forums, another great one. Ubuntu forums are always really, really good. Mailing list, you'll find these in search results and Usenet news groups. IRC is an internet chat, sort of similar to the Slack chat that I have set up for the class here, uh, but it's a little bit more primitive. So it's just text-based, really. You can do some coloring with your text, but that's about it. And you'll find a lot of really helpful people in the IRC chats. If you look around the different chat rooms, you can usually find a chat room for the distribution like Pound Ubuntu, or there might be one for Mozilla or Firefox, something like that. And as a last result, just web searches. Search around for what you're trying to do. Get good at using a search engine. So if we're trying to figure out how to do something in a particular distribution, we may want to type in how to, what it is that we're looking to do, and then follow that up with the word Ubuntu or Fedora. That way we sort of narrow down the results that we're going to get back. So with that, that wraps up chapter 6. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If not, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.